Good afternoon and welcome to distinguished ladies and gentlemen. May I have your attention please? Our webinar is about to begin at 3 p.m. We would kindly advise all participants in the webinar to prepare and find the most comfortable positions. Thank you very much. To be your master in ceremony in this very special occasions. Ladies and gentlemen, over the next 2 hours, this webinar will provide you to plenty of opportunity to discuss, share knowledge and insight. This webinar is also broadcast live in the BSMBS UGM YouTube channel for YouTube participants. Thank you very much for joining this webinar.
Recording in progress.
Before we proceed these events, today we would like to express our sincere gratitude to MA Intercultural Communication Multilingual Track, University of Utrecht, Netherlands. Good afternoon, Ms. Chiara Massa. Oh yeah, maybe in the Netherlands it's still early, right? Good morning, Ms. Chiara. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you, because it's very early here. The sun just rose, but it's afternoon, so good afternoon.
Right. We also have the head of Bachelor of Applied English Study Program, Vocational College of Universitas Gadjah Mada, Mr. Ahmad Muam, SSMSc. Good afternoon, Mr. Muam.
Good afternoon, everyone.
It's nice to see you here.
Nice to see you.
Furthermore, we also have student presentations from Universitas Nusa Cendana and Indonesian Arts Institute Yogyakarta. And last but not least, we will also have presentation by student from Indonesian Cross-Cultural Communication class, Bachelor of Applied English Study Program 2022, Vocational College of Universitas Gadjah Mada. So before we start, please allow me to read the plain down of today's webinar and etiquette in these forums. This webinar will be starts with opening, singing Indonesian National Anthem, Indonesia Raya, opening speech by the head of Bachelor of Applied English Study Program, Mr. Ahmad Muam, SSMSc, and first session with Ms. Chiara Massa with the topic, Studying Intercultural Communication Curriculum and Reflections, and the first question and answer session from Ms. Chiara. Next is student presentation from Group 6 by UGM student with the topic, Temples and Sustainable Development from the Lens of Locality, follow the second Q&A sessions, and then student presentations from Universitas Nusa Cendana and Indonesian Arts Institute Yogyakarta with the topic Local Identified Cultures of NTT. Another group presentation from Group 7 by UGM student with the topic Disaster and Cultural Mitigations. And last group presentation from Group 8 by UGM student with the topic Traditional Arts, Cultural Community and the Profession. And then follow with the question and answer with this session for 2 groups. Ultimately, we will have the closing and documentation sessions follow with the absent from that will be shared throughout the chat box. And then please also to follow the house rules of today's event, which are please turn off your microphone if you're not talking, and participants are requested to not interrupt the speaker when the speaker is delivering the material. If you have any question while the speaker is doing the presentations, you can leave your question by writing on the chat box, and the question and answer session which will be open after each presenter has presented their materials. We will appreciate it if you can open your camera if the moderator chooses your questions to be addressed. And then for the last, fill out the attendance link and feedback forms as we will share in the link in the chat box. Ladies and gentlemen, to begin this event, we are pleased to invite all the attendees to sing the national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Media team, the screen is yours. Alright, to continue the event, we will have Mr. Ahmad Muam SSMSC, the head of Bachelor of Applied History Program, Vocational College of Universitas Gadjah Mada, to deliver the opening speech. Mr. Muam, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Zulfa Wanda. So good afternoon, everyone, and especially for Miss Tiara. So good mornings. We share different times. So at first, I'd like to introduce myself. So my name is Muam. Now I'm speaking here on behalf of the study programs, the Applied English Sekolah Vokasi, Vocational College, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Then so at first, I would like to thanks for all of the committee, for all of the students who have prepared, who have offered everything to support to have this kind of wonderful events. We are going to learn a lot. We always have a different topics, always an interesting one. And today we are going to talk about social and historical heritage with a lot of recognized speakers. Then the second one, I would like to say thanks a lot to the speakers for taking the time today to share the knowledge. We are going to learn a lot, Miss Tiara Masa, and also we are going to have some presentations from students groups. Um, from the study programs, we have a couple of groups, and also, if I'm not mistaken, today we also invite a group from Universitas. I forget the names, but I would like to say welcome for all of you. Okay, so this is an interesting one. We always, every week, we always share, exchange the ideas about how we live in different contexts, talking about the social culture and historical heritage. And I have a kind of dream actually in the future we might have kind of a conference inviting a lot of students, not only in Universitas Gadjah Mada, but any other universities, and also probably we might ask help from overseas universities. We invite them to speak within one topic in one big event, right? But I appreciate a lot for the students from the class under Miss Dewi. Yes, I forget to say thanks to Miss Dewi, who have been the backbone of these programs for a very long period actually. Now we reach the number 42, right? The 42 is quite huge numbers. To maintain the consistency is some things that we have to be proud of actually. So the study program always support this kind of nativity. Hopefully we are going to reach more and more numbers, and probably we are going to have webinar event talks. The number 99, for example. So we are going to happy to reach that point later on. Okay, so without further ado, let's start this fruitful webinar, and we are going to learn a lot from every speakers. There is no single absolute knowledge. Actually, we always learn from the others, then we try to complete our knowledge, our understandings. Then it will be a good opportunity to reach that purpose. Okay, so without further ado, let's start the fruitful webinar this afternoon or this morning. Okay, thank you, Sulfawan.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Maang, for the great opening speech. So, before we get to the main sessions, it will be incomplete if we didn't take a picture of today's event. So, I'm going to open the documentation session. Media team, be ready. All right, I'm going to count down from 3, 3, 2, 1. All right, another pause, count down from 3, 3, 2, 1. Last one, count down from 3. Give your brightest smile. 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you, everyone. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce my fellow, also from Bachelor of Applied English Study Program, Vocational College of Universitas Gadjah Mada, Niken Khaironisa. Niken will be the moderator of today's sessions and discussions. Niken, the screen is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Wanda. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, everyone. Welcome, our speaker and attendees. This is webinar event talk 42 under the theme of the diversity of culture and art in various aspects of human life, social and historical heritage. My name is Niken Herunisa Gunadanti. You can call me Niken, and I will be your moderator in this session. And as Wanda mentioned before, our very beautiful guest speaker is waiting here, Miss Yara Masa. Hello, Miss. How are you? You look so gorgeous today.
Thank you, thank you. It's very, very early still. It's still like dark in the Netherlands because it's so early, so the sunrise is very, very late. But thank you very much. I did my very best to polish up a little bit.
Nice to meet you, Miss. All right. In this session, there will be 5 presentations in total. The first one will be delivered by our guest speaker, Miss Yara Masa. And the second is presentation from Universitas Gadjah Mada, Group 6, under the theme of Temples and Sustainable Development from the Lens of Locality. Next, there will be a group from Universitas Nusa Cendana and also Indonesian Institute of the Arts Yogyakarta under the theme of Local Identity and Cultures of Nusa Tenggara Timur. After that, we'll see the presentation from Universitas Gadjah Mada, Group 7, that will talk about disaster and cultural mitigation. And then we will move to the last group from Universitas Gadjah Mada, Group 8, that will break down the topic of traditional arts or cultural community and the profession. However, I would like to introduce our guest speaker to you, ladies and gentlemen, and provide a brief biography of her before Ms. Yara delivers her presentation. So Ms. Yaramasa is passionate about intercultural encounters and collaboration, as well as mediation and switching between languages and contexts. That is why she is good at many languages such as German, Italian, Dutch, French, English, and also Spanish. She has been graduated from International Media Management at Karlsruhe School International University at Germany. And she has been doing semester abroad at Tecnológico de Monterrey at Mexico. And then she continued to study at University of Passau, Germany, with the major of International and Cultural Business Studies. And now she is studying Intercultural Communication Multilingual track at University of Utrecht, Netherlands. Also, Ms. Yara has many experiences at SEO and copywriting. She's even a member of curriculum committee at Utrecht University and had done an internship marketing and public relations at Nakuna Film Production in Germany. And then She has been joined of volunteering to be a mentor and coordinator in German from 2019 to 2022. She was helping newly arrived refugees to get settled in Germany through one-on-one mentorship between students of the University of Passau and refugees from all over the world. Wow, what an inspiring and talented person, right? Everyone, you might give your reaction by clapping hands to appreciate our amazing guest speaker today. Okay, thank you. Since we don't have much time, without further ado, let's begin the main session that will be opened by Miss Yara's presentation. To Miss Yara, the screen is yours.
Thank you. All right. You have to give me 1 second to set up my presentation because unfortunately I don't have the professional background. It didn't work on me, so you're going to have to deal with this whole situation. I hope that's okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. I hope this goes well, but I'm quite optimistic actually. If you're having, or if we're having any troubles with the sound, or you can't see me, or you can't hear me, please let me know. I have a very old computer and it's very slow at oftentimes, so just hectically wave with your hands if you can't hear me. But if you don't, then I'm going to assume that you can all hear me well. So good afternoon to all of you. I'm very, very pleased to be here. I'm a little tired still because it's so early in the morning for me, but I'm very excited to talk to you about my study program because I've been introduced very well. Thank you so much. I feel very humbled by you. So I'm doing, as already mentioned, my studies in intercultural communications in Utrecht in the Netherlands. For those who've never heard of it, which I completely understand, it's very close to Amsterdam. It's a 20-minute train ride. It's a very beautiful city. If you ever have the chance to visit, I really recommend you do. But I digress. I'm doing my master's in intercultural communication here, and I will be talking to you today about the master's program itself and what I'm learning, why I'm learning these things, why I think that intercultural communication is something very useful for a lot of different areas, and what my personal learnings are from the study program, okay? As already said, there will be like a question round at the end, but feel free to ask any question. There's no such thing as stupid questions, there's only stupid answers. All right, okay, so quick question, can you see me move my pointer? Do you see my mouse moving?
Yes, Miss.
Yes, okay, good, great. All right, so on the agenda today, I'm going to start by talking about intercultural communication as a subject in general, and why I think that it's something very much worth looking into for everybody, no matter what area you come from. Secondly, I'm going to talk specifically about my master's program in Utrecht, and I'm quickly going to give you some data about the study program, and I would actually love to then hear from you how your study program is built, because I think the structure is very, very different. So I'm really curious to learn about your studies as well. Thirdly, I will talk about the reflections. So for me, what I've learned in this very short time, mind you, I've only been here for a couple of months. So I've had to really think about what I've learned in these couple of months and try to write them down to kind of transfer them to you. And last but not least, a plenary discussion or a really quick question round where we can talk about interculturality together. So first and foremost, intercultural communication. Why do we have to look into, but first of all, what is it? So there's this very rough definition that we sometimes use in our studies. There's a lot of different definitions of intercultural communication, but this is a very prevalent one, which says that intercultural communication refers to a situation where people from different cultural backgrounds come into contact with each other, or it can also be subject of study that is concerned with interactions among people of different cultural and ethnic groups and comparative studies of communication patterns across cultures. I'm sure that most of you think of the first part of the definition, intercultural communication means when cultures interact with each other, which is perfectly legitimate. I think one of the most confusing thing about intercultural communication is that everybody has their own definition. Everybody sees it from a different perspective. It's very versatile. It comes from very, different disciplines. So it's very natural to just think that intercultural communication is the first part of the definition, but you will very soon learn that is a very, a very large subject with different pathways. So what exactly are these pathways? So intercultural communication means studying applied linguistics or just linguistics, anthropology, it's literary and art studies, it's communication studies, and not only in the sense of communication between people, but also communication as a media studies. There's culture in the way that media is produced as well. Sociology, of course, because intercultural communication is a study of the humanities, so we're studying people, and if you're studying people, then you're also studying, social interactions. And last but not least, my personal favorite, because otherwise I wouldn't be here today, is education. So taking the knowledge that you learned in one place and making sure that you can transfer it to somebody else with the right cultural aspects. Right, so the list goes on. These are, of course, not the only ones, but just to give you a quick insight into how many, different things you can apply intercultural communication to. So what makes communication intercultural, right? We have two scenarios that we usually use in theory to kind of define intercultural communication or when it happens. And the first one is the setting, namely what you perceive, meaning that intercultural communication is something that you can see as a person, right? So an example for this would be a physical place or, two people in a human encounter, and you would, for example, see an American student talking to a Dutch student in a cafe in the Netherlands. So I think it's clear to everyone this is a clearly intercultural situation, not only the people involved, the place, the setting, right? These are things that you can see from the outside as an observer. But then we also have the context, right? What is happening? And as a distant observer, you're not always able to see what interaction is actually going on. So the context of intercultural communication is social and linguistic variables that shape the human encounter. What does that mean, right? So it means that we're talking about the things that you cannot see, so it's intangible, meaning the relationship between the American and the Dutch student. They're talking about which languages they're using, right? Do they speak in English? Do they speak in Dutch? Because the American student is learning Dutch. Do they speak a third language, which they're both, learning at university, for example, Spanish? You don't know that, right? So you have two layers of intercultural communication that you always have to consider. So at Utrecht University specifically, what does it look like studying intercultural communication? Bear with me, the system is very, very strange. I've had to figure it out myself for a while. I hope you can understand everything clearly. If not, please let me know. I'm completely happy to explain it to you again. So really quick facts and figures. Intercultural communication master's degree at Utrecht University means that you're doing a full-time study of 60 credit points, at least, the European credit point system. I don't know if a similar system exists in Indonesia, but I'm presuming yes. 60 credits means that you're studying for 1 year, so it's very compact, it's very short. I started last September, I will be ending next year in August. It all goes by very quickly. Then there's the study format, which is 4 blocks of 8 to 10 weeks. So we don't have semesters or trimesters, or we don't calculate in a year. We calculate in sets of 8 to 10 weeks. And then you have classes for 8 weeks. It's very intense. And you have exams, and then you have a week off, right? It's the Faculty of Humanities. As I said, it's, a study that revolves around human beings in essence and, social aspects of human beings. So it's at the Faculty of Humanities. Your degree that you get in the end is officially a linguistics degree, although I will go into that in a minute, what exactly that means. Of course, it's still an intercultural communication degree, but let's say that the umbrella term and the department is still the linguistics department, because intercultural communication is a lot about the use of language. And last but not least, within the study program, and this is probably the most complex aspect of it, is that students choose one of 7 language tracks, right? So I hear you ask, what are language tracks, right? So language tracks are the following. We have a language-specific track and a multilingual track. And when you register for your studies in Utrecht, you pick one of 2. And studying the language-specific track means that you choose between German, English, French, Italian, Dutch, or Spanish, and you will do most of your studies for the entire year in either one of these languages, right? But you have to choose one. So if you want to specialize in, for example, French, you're going to have to choose the specific language track in French, so you can get a supplementary diploma stating that you specialize in French, right? You can pair this in the Netherlands, at least, with an educational master, meaning that you can even study intercultural communication, as I said, for the educational aspect, so you can become a French teacher, for example, right? It gives you this extra supplement of a diploma, as I just explained, and your final thesis has to be written in that language. So, if you choose a specific language, you have to make sure that you're good at it, because you're going to have to write your final assignment of your studies in that language. Then you have the multilingual track, which is what I chose because I didn't want to pick one language. I wanted to pick multiple languages and have a little bit more range during my studies. And what does it mean to, do the multilingual track? It means that you can combine languages, right? So I combined French and English, and I have some courses in Italian as well. And this gives you like a very rounded, but also very random curriculum of, different perspectives from different languages, which I personally enjoy very much, but everybody has to decide for themselves. You need receptive skills for the multilingual track, which I would like to go into very quickly, because I think this is a wonderful thing that we do at the University of Utrecht. And that is that in order to be able to take part in language courses, you don't necessarily have to be fluent in the language in writing and speaking. You only need receptive skills, meaning that you have to be able to understand the language, which I personally think is beautiful, because that means that a lot of people can participate, for example, in Spanish class, because they, for example, their first language is Italian, they understand Spanish very well, but maybe they have trouble speaking, or they have trouble writing an academic paper, which the University of Utrecht accepts. And so we tell these students you can still participate and you can learn the language by listening to it, but you don't have to produce any assignments in the language if you don't feel comfortable. So this opens the door for a lot of students to, of course, participate in courses, even if they're not 100% fluent in the language. And it's surprisingly effective. You have a multi-perspective approach, right? So all the languages come from a very specific cultural area, so they will have their own cultural perspective on certain topics that you learn, and your theses at the end, in comparison to the language-specific track, you can write your theses in any of the chosen language, whichever you feel most comfortable in. So the modules, right? So as I said, we have these 4 blocks in 1 year, so 4 course periods. My first block was from September until mid-November. It's a very short period of time, and you usually have 3 courses. And our first course was Communication, Diversity, and Organization in theory, right, where you focused on the role of language and culture in communication processes within multicultural or international organizations. And then there was another module which went hand in hand with this one, which is Communication, Diversity, Organization Methods, right? Where you apply the knowledge that you've learned from communication diversity theories with the methods, right? So you learn scientific theories about intercultural communication, and then you learn the methods so you can apply those to your research projects, right? So these 2 courses, they go hand in hand, and they're the very foundation of your studies. And then you always have a language-specific course where you have each one of the courses of the languages that I mentioned, and there's a focal point always. So there's, in different languages, always one topic that is at the focus. And in the first block, it was cultural identity and literature. I did the course in French, and it was, for example, about colonial history, about French identity, what does it mean to be French, and I enjoyed it very much. It's very, it goes very deep into the literature. And the second block, which is where we're in right now, I'm actually in the absolute middle of my second block right now at the university. I have a course called Plurilingualism and Mediation. Don't be fooled by the word mediation. We're not talking about mediating between people, as in being in the middle between 2 parties. We're talking about mediation as in communication studies, so media, journalism, TV, But why do we do, media studies in intercultural communication? It's because, and this is a very long description, it says students acquire knowledge in interactive approaches of cultural representation, contrastive approaches, plurilingual approaches, transfer approaches with respect to integral competences. What does that mean? It's a very long definition, but it basically boiled down, it just means that we look at media. For example, now we're doing a project on news articles, and we're looking at one culture, so how does culture A report about culture B, and what are the cultural aspects of the way that media is produced? It's very interesting because people don't think about that. So that is the module of mediation that we have this semester. It's taught in English and in Dutch. You can pick either one. Then we have intercultural consultancy, which I think is something a lot of students are interested in because it's very much applied knowledge of like the first block, and how can you go to a client or somebody who has a very specific problem and help them with the knowledge that you acquired at the university about intercultural communication, right? So students examine how they can contribute to cultural understanding by formulating advice for real organizations. So later in this block, not right now, but in due time, an organization will actually come to us as students, and they will have a very specific problem, and we will have the assignment to help them solve this problem. And of course, there's a lot of pressure because it's an actual organization who has an actual problem. It's not just fictional. You have to actually try to solve whatever it is that they bring to you. Then again, you have, as in the last block, a language-specific course. This time the focal point is specifically plurilingualism and linguistic analysis or research. So you really look at how is language used. It's very specific. For example, what I did in the past week, we looked at the way politeness is used. So for example, I don't know how it is in Indonesia, if there's a lot of politeness in the language, if there's very little politeness in the language, but the way that people speak and how politeness they are also shows you and tells you a lot about the culture, right? How much distance is there between people in the way that they speak? So block 3 and block 4, pardon me, are very stressful because it's the last, 2 blocks of your degree where you have to write your final theses, right? Either, within 10 weeks, which is a very short amount of time. So you have to make sure that you organize yourself, and you choose either a language-specific course, as I said in the beginning, or in my case, you choose from one of the languages that you've picked off your multilingual track. There's a bunch of topics that you can choose. Most people struggle with that topic because, of course, there's a lot of lecturers and teachers who come from like very different disciplines. So I think the most difficult thing is actually finding a topic to write about for 10 weeks. And then we have at the end of our studies, which is interesting because usually your studies end with a thesis, right? At the end of your bachelor's or master's, usually you write a thesis. For us, it's the other way around. We write our thesis first, and then we have an internship, which is compulsory, where you have to familiarize yourself with the professional field. You have to acquire intercultural competence at a job. And you have to look for an internship either in the Netherlands or abroad, where you can work also, I think, for 10 weeks, right? So the study program is half theory and methods, and the other half is very much like hand-on applying your knowledge in like a research setting. So what do we learn, or what is the best case acquired skill set that you can, that you will gain after having done these studies? So students acquire the ability to identify hidden meaning within text. That means that when we look at text, right, you can read what the text actually says, but you can also read between the lines. I'm sure you're familiar with the expression. So looking at what is the person who is writing this text actually saying us from a cultural perspective, how has the culture of this person shaped the way that they, produce media or text, for example. They can communicate in spoken and written context. I think this is very much clear. I think this is a goal of every student everywhere. Examine how culture is used as a resource. So I think something that we often learn in our studies is that a lot of people consider intercultural communication to be something that is based on friction, that is based on people who misunderstand each other because their culture is different. But something that you learn is that culture is a resource, right? You just have to know how to use it. You just have to know how to find out how it works. But culture is a really, really great asset. It's just sometimes a little bit difficult to navigate. But it's important that you understand that it's not necessarily a bad thing, or that it doesn't always cause misunderstandings. Actually, it's quite the opposite. Sometimes it causes very unexpected understandings between people, right? And you learn that during your studies. You can identify social issues and problems. This is very closely related to like the consultancy course, where you have to actually ask the right questions to see, okay, what is my client actually having as a problem, and how can I help them solve this? You can mediate an intercultural context. This time I am talking about being in the middle between two parties. Okay, so this is not about media anymore. This is actually about being the third, like, neutral party between two other parties and helping them, understand an issue that they might be having. Describe languages, and here it's very important to understand that we're describing, right? We're not just understanding and learning the languages, we're also learning to look at them from, objective, subjective viewpoint. So look at how language is used in a certain context. And last but not least, understand the use of language in social interactions and practices, which I think applies to the rest of the points, right? Our educational methods most of them are very similar to any other educational method. I know that you are probably saying to yourself, yeah, but I mean, we also have lectures and tutorials and group works and hands-on assignments. This doesn't make your study program special. And I know that it doesn't, but there's three things that the University of Utrecht does like a lot. And that is group work, independent study, and reflection, right? So you have to, it's kind of evident that in a study program that is called intercultural communication, there's a lot of people from a lot of different countries, and you have to learn to work together. So 80% of your assignments will be done in a group of 3 to 4 people, and you will have to learn to navigate whatever assignment you have together. It's a master's program, so you have to study a lot independently, you have to read a lot yourself, you have to make sure that you keep up with the materials, and last but not least, reflection, which does not mean to look in the mirror. It means, I mean, metaphorically it means to look in the mirror, but it basically just tells you that you have to write about your experiences and what you learned at the university in your past studies. So a question that I get asked very, very often when I tell people that I study intercultural communication, especially at family functions or Christmas dinner or something of the likes, is what do you do with intercultural communication, right? What work can I do with this? And I can go on about a whole list of jobs and careers that you can do, but fortunately on the University of Utrecht, there's on the website a very nice table. It's a little bit outdated, but on every website of a study program, they tell you your career prospects. So this is the table. It's a little bit outdated because the sample was taken in July 2018, as I'm just seeing, but basically from 305 people who finished their masters in intercultural communication, most of them went into, communications officers, so people who do advising and communication, public relations, things of sorts. A lot of people go into marketing, but also into, teaching and education or general management positions. So it's a very, very broad subject, and there's a very broad, array of jobs that you can go into. And I think it's a great supplementary degree because everybody can use it at some point. So we're almost at the end. I'm almost done with my presentation. We're just going to go to reflections real quick because I think this is the most important part, at least for me personally, because it's about learnings, right? So what are my personal takeaways from studying intercultural communication? And I made this look like a jigsaw because I thought metaphorically in my head, it feels like puzzle pieces are coming together, and at some point around the end of my studies, it will be a well-rounded image that will make sense, or in this case, a skill set. So they all look very obvious, but I want to stress that these things are very, very important nevertheless, right? Which is why I call them imperatives, because these are rules that you should follow in your daily life as well, not only in your studies. So the first one is listen. And it's very, it's a very trivial thing to be listening, but you have to understand that listening is something you have to actively do, because most of us listen to each other, especially when somebody has a problem, and you're already thinking in your head what advice you're going to give the other person. And especially in courses such as intercultural consultancy, it's very important that you learn to actively listen to the other person and understand the place that they're coming from, right? Listening goes hand in hand with observing, and by observing, I don't mean to sit silently in the conversation and to look at the other person. By observing, I mean that you have to sometimes distance yourself from a situation and try to look at it very objectively. This is something that we learn in research a lot because we do a lot of like ethnographic research, which means that you look from the outside and you try to kind of distance yourself from a situation. So you have to sometimes also use your eyes to see what is going on. Then, of course, listening, observing also kind of fits with asking. So learning to ask the right questions is essential in your daily life as well. It opens a lot of doors because you not only show the person that you're sitting with that you're interested in them, but it also shows that you are following what they're saying and that you're willing to help them. So it's really important to ask the right questions, which is something that you can learn with time. Empathize. I think especially, and this is my personal opinion, I think especially in the business world and when things are very serious, we have like university, a lot of serious projects, we sometimes forget that we're still all human and that we all have emotions of anger, of sadness, of happiness, of excitement. And it's very important to, even in a cultural setting, try to also understand the emotion that the person is presenting to you. It's sometimes difficult to do that because you really have to make a switch in your mind, but I think it's a great advice to give because it's something we all deal with, right? Empathizing is something you have to learn, but it is very, very useful because it can bring you closer to a person. Critical thinking, something university students have to learn at some point, but it's really important to always not only ask questions, but also kind of see if there's something that you can scrutinize when you look at research, when you look at a certain situation. Be critical of the situation, right? Of course, don't force it. If you agree, you agree, but maybe what I want to say is don't be afraid to disagree. And this is something they teach us at university a lot, is they give us a research paper or they show us some research and they ask us, what do you think about this? Do you agree? And it doesn't matter whether the person has been in the research field for 20 years, students are still given the opportunity to disagree, which I think is wonderful. And lastly, reflect. As I already said in the teaching methods, there's a lot of reflections that you do, but reflecting is also something that you should do yourself. And ask, after you've had an interaction with somebody, intercultural or not, what just happened? Why did we agree so well? Why did we disagree? How did I feel during this interaction? It's a bit strange in the beginning, but it really helps you to distance yourself from a situation in a way and look at it objectively and kind of in an analytical way, which you can learn a lot from. So these are my general rules. I know that they're very, very general, but I think these are skill sets that have been reinforced a lot through my studies, which I'm very grateful for because I didn't expect this to happen. Right. That's the roundup, I would say, of my presentation. Now's the moment for questions or comments or anything you would like to ask. I think I've told everything I want to tell. If there's anything else, though, I'd be happy to answer questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Chiara, for the insightful material. This is the first presentation, but our knowledge is getting wider. For those of you who are interested and who want to take same major with Ms. Chiara, you already have a big picture of the course. All right, everyone. If you have any questions about the topic delivered by Ms. Chiara, you can just write down your questions to the chat box or raise your hand and ask directly by turning your microphone on. Maybe I want to ask me, since everyone maybe still needs time to prepare their question. I want to ask about why you like to learn about languages and what motivated you to learn multiple languages. Thank you, Miss.
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, I think for me personally, it's because my parents are from different countries and I grew up in another country and I've always been surrounded by different languages and very different people. And I think it's always been a blessing to be able to be surrounded by so many different people. And I don't know what fascinates me so much about language, but sometimes I think that people underestimate how important language is. I mean, for those who speak a second language, what difference it makes when you speak to somebody in their native tongue as opposed to you speak to somebody in, for example, English, right? It can really access people. So language is culture, right? culture is not only explained through language, but language in itself is also culture. So I think my motivation is just that I see language as one of the most important aspects of culture. And since I'm interested in culture, I'm also interested in languages. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Miss. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Oh, there is an India Abian who wants to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Thank you.
Abian.
Thank you. Ms. Kiara, I want to ask, you mentioned about asking the right questions open a lot of doors, but I want to know how to find the right question to ask.
So it sounds like really, really big advice, but for example, I think something that helps me personally to understand somebody is when they're telling you a story, right? It's important to follow that story and to just like ask about details, right? Somebody tells you, it's a very trivial situation, but for example, somebody tells you about their day, and they tell you, well, I went to a restaurant with my family. It's already a good question to ask, oh, to which restaurant did you go? Did you like it? Did your family like it? Did you enjoy the experience? It's very small questions, and you can apply these to a different context, but it just shows the person that you're listening to them, that you're interested in them. And obviously, as I'm sitting here, people love to talk about themselves, right? So use that and ask them questions. Of course, not to manipulate them, do it with the right intentions, please, but always be aware of the fact that people want to be seen and they want to be heard, and the best way to signal this to them, in my opinion, is to ask very specific and detailed questions, even if it's about little things. I think you must be very pleased when somebody takes a great interest in your life and asks you, I don't know, what did you have for breakfast? And then you can tell them about your breakfast. And then they ask you back, oh, why do you eat this for breakfast? Or how long have you been eating this for breakfast? It's very trivial, but it's a way to empathize because you show them interest, right?
All right, thank you, Miss. That's answered my questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abian, for the questions. Is there any other questions? Wait, let me check on the chat box.
I mean, I know that I think I overstretched the time that I had a little bit, which I'm very, very sorry for. I can leave my email in the what's it called, in the chat if you want to. I just forgot the word. I can leave my email in the chat if you want to, and if you have any further questions or inquiries, or you want material or whatever it is, you can send me an email. I'd be happy to answer any emails if you don't want to ask a question right now. I can do that, but I see that there's another question in the chat.
Yes.
Yes. So I want to ask you, why do you think it's important to understand the cultural context of a message when communicating with others from different cultures? Oh, yeah, well, it's a very good question. Why is it important to understand the cultural context of a message? Well, it's important, I think, to, just because you misunderstand somebody or because you're having maybe like a little bit of friction with a person who is from a different culture or country, you shouldn't always, say, oh, it's probably because of their culture, right? You shouldn't just attribute a misunderstanding to their culture. It can also be that the person is just rude, right? It's not always where they come from, okay? So you have to be very critical of that. But I think it's important to understand not necessarily a specific culture, but to understand that in general, in every interaction that you have, like this one we're having right now, my culture plays a great role in how I present myself, how I talk to you, if I'm polite or if I'm impolite, how I say good morning, how I say goodbye, and yours influences yourself as well. So it's very important to just acknowledge the fact that culture plays a role in interaction, and understanding, of course, the culture that a person comes from in a very diplomatic way, by being very respectful, of course, helps you to understand the person as well. Because if you know that, for example, this is a stereotype, it's a huge cliche, and I don't think my teachers would be very pleased if they heard me say this, but, stereotypes are still, in part, sometimes a little bit true. And something they say about Dutch people very often, for example, that they're very direct, Okay, they have this very direct way of communicating. They say things very much to the point. They don't hesitate to be critical of you, but they also don't hesitate to be very nice to you and to give you very positive feedback. But for example, for me, it's sometimes very tough to deal with this because I'm a very indirect person. If I give feedback, I will be always very nice and I will talk around it. I will be as polite as possible. And it's sometimes difficult for me to deal with people who give me really direct and critical feedback. But I understand that they have learned it this way and that they all their life have been given feedback like this. So they think it's completely normal to talk to other people like this, which is totally fine. And to answer your question, it's important to keep this in mind, right? That people are not just being mean to you, or they're not just being different to be annoying. They're being different because they have a different culture, which has, influenced them in a different way. And we do ourselves as well, right? You're not the standard. Nobody is the standard of culture. And we have a lot of differences, but differences can also unite. And it's important to understand that they can bring you together more than they can put you apart. I hope that makes sense. It's a very long explanation for a simple question, but that is how I would have answered it.
Thank you so much, Miss Chiara. All right, I think we don't have much time here. Thank you so much, everyone, for the questions, and thank you so much for the presentation and the answer, Miss Chiara. And that's all for the first session of the presentation today. For Miss Chiara, you may stay if you want to, but if you have other work to do, you may leave this webinar. Thank you so much, Miss. I hope we can see in the next future.
Thank you for having me. I hope I could help some people. I'll leave my email in the chat, and then I'm gonna say goodbye and wish you a wonderful rest of your afternoon/evening.
All right, thank you so much, Miss. All
Sure.
right, everyone, let's continue to the second session. There is a group 6 from Universitas Gadjah Mada that consists of Sania Rafamazaya, Fatima Prahastika Pramono, Alifini Rahmayankinanti, and also Latif Nurfirmansyah. They will deliver an interesting topic about temples and sustainable development from the lens of locality. So Sania and friends, the screen is yours.
Okay, but before that, I'm sorry, could you hear my voice?
Yes, clearly.
Okay, thank you in advance for giving us an opportunity to present our materials today. And next slide, please. Okay, and first I would like to introduce the members of the group. I'm Fatima Prastika, and I'm here together with my friends. They are Latif, Sania, and Rahma, and we are from UGM 6. And next slide, please. And at this moment, we would like to break down our topic about Borobudur Temple, Tari Topeng Ireng, the differences between Tari Topeng Ireng in Magelang and Boyolali, and the last is sustainable tourism. Okay, next slide, please. And now it's time for us to talk about the materials. The first thing I'm going to talk about is, what is the temple actually for? The temple is an ancient building made of stone, and the temple was used as a place of worship, storing the ashes of Hindu-Buddhist kings and priests in ancient times, whereas in modern times, the notion of the temple refers to a place of worship, relics of Hindu-Buddhist civilization, and used to function as a place to glorify Buddha. And next slide, please. Okay, while Borobudur Temple has a broad building structure which consists of 3 parts, there are head, body, and feet, and these parts have different meanings and are implicitly related based on Buddhist concepts. In addition, Borobudur Temple also stores Buddhist teachings which are conveyed through symbols on the Borobudur Temple's statues, reliefs, and stupas. The reliefs on Borobudur Temple tell the teachings conveyed by the Buddha that Borobudur Temple is a place to learn about human life. Okay, and that's all from me. For the next slide will be explained by Latif, and Latif, time is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ika. First, next slide, please. Turning to the arts in the environment around Borobudur Temple, one of them is Topeng Ireng dance. Based on local stories, the Topeng Ireng arts began to develop among the people of the slopes of Merapi Merbabu since the Dutch colonial era and continued its development in 1960. Many Topeng Ireng developed among rural community on the slope of Mount Merapi and Merbabu in the 1950s. At the time of the new order, Mr. Haji Muhammad Soeharto was the president of Republic Indonesia around 1995. It was feared that Dayakan owned words contained racial elements. So this artwork was changed from Dayakan to Topeng Ireng or Black Mask since 2005. Next slide, please. On the slopes of the Menore Hills, Borobudur, to be precious in Tuk Songo, is the birthplace of kesenian Dayan or Topeng Ireng art. At the time of the Dutch government, the colonial government in the past prohibited citizens from learning Silat, so that the residents developed various Silat movement into folk dance. The dance is followed by gamelan music and Japanese songs which essentially concern various advice about the good life and the spread of Islam. Next slide, please. Mr. Handoko, who is a resident of Warangan Village, Pakis District, Magelang Regency, saw the art of Dayakan in Tuk Songo Village, and then made it into a new dance, then spread it into Boyolali. Okay, that's all for me. The next slide will explain by Nia.
Well, beforehand, could you hear my voice?
Yes, Sonia.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Latif. Now, let's talk about the differences in Topeng Ireng between Boyolali and Magelang. First, the member of the dancers. The differences are in the number of dancers and the gender of the dancer who usually participate in the performance. While Boyolali has 10 Topeng Ireng dancers, Magelang has 22 Topeng Ireng dancers. Topeng Ireng dancer in Magelang consists of both men and women who are active in the performance, whereas Topeng Ireng dancer in Boyolali are only male dancers who are active in the performance. Next slide, please. Secondly, music, especially musical instruments. The difference is found in the number of musical instruments used. There are 2 sarung musical instruments used in the Magelang and 1 tambourine, while in Boyolali, they use 3 sarung musical instruments and 2 tambourines. Topeng Ireng in Boyolali has additional musical instruments such as angklung and rakitan, while in Magelang, there are no additional musical instruments. Next slide, please. Thank you. The next one, makeup. There are also differences in the appearance of the makeup as well. Topeng Ireng from Magelang, for making a mask, the steps are from the inside to the outside or from the eyes to the nose. In the order of colors is black, white, orange, black, white. Meanwhile, the steps for making a mask for the Topeng Ireng in Boyolali are from the outside to the inside. In order of colors is black, red, white, and black. Next slide, please. And the last one, dance property. The dance properties of Topeng Ireng that are being used from Wilangan Village in Magelang Regency are spears, axes, and shields. Meanwhile, Topeng Ireng in Tarubatang Village, Boyolali Regency, used an umbrella as a prop. During a performance, the properties as used change the theme of the event and are frequently used. I think that's all about the differences between Topeng Ireng from Magelang and Boyolali. And the next slide will be presented by Rahma. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, Rahma.
All right. Thank you, Nia. So I'm going to continue the presentation. Last point here is about the sustainable tourism. So sustainable tourism is the tourism that takes full account of its current and future economic, social, and environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry, the environment, and host communities. This was defined by the UN Environment Programme and UN World Tourism Organization. Sustainable tourism is, of course, also related to several other things, including cultural sustainability. Cultural sustainability, maintaining cultural beliefs, cultural practice, heritage conservation, culture as its own entity, and the question of whether or not any given cultures will exist in the future. Cultural sustainability, tourism, and development considers how tourism provides a lens through which to examine issues of cultural sustainability and change. It discusses how cultural and natural assets, artistic intervention, place identity, policy strategies, and community well-being are intertwined in articulation of place and local dynamics that occur in tourist location. This traditional dance and also other form of art and culture which born and evolved in Indonesia must have been maintained and preserved. By implementing the cultural sustainability collaborated with the sustainable tourism, it will surely help us to preserve this traditional dance and also other Indonesian cultures. Perhaps that's all from our group. Thank you everyone for your attention. May what we present was useful for you, and for the next, we will return the screen back to the moderator. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to Sunny and friends for delivering the insightful material. And then the information presented is very interesting about the historical heritage of Borobudur Temple and also the dance that even found into regions in Indonesia. And also each has its own uniqueness. All right, now let's move on to the second presentation. There are Aloysius No from Universitas Nusa Cendana and Romario Eliezer Kase from Indonesian Institute of the Arts Yogyakarta under the topic of local identity and cultures of Nusa Tenggara Timur. But before Aloysius and Rio start their presentation, I would like to remind everyone not to forget to fill in the attendance link that has been provided via chat box. And there will be a feedback form at the end of the event, so make sure you always pay attention to this webinar. Okay, Luis and Rio, you can start your presentation now. The screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, Niken. Can you guys hear my voice clearly?
Yes, Rio.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity given to me to introduce my culture of origin, Nusa Tenggara Timur. So let me introduce myself. My name is Romario Eliezer Kase. I am an interior design student of the Indonesian Institute of Arts, Yogyakarta. And today, together with my friends,
I am Lois. I am from Nusa Tenggara Timur, and I am a student from University of Nusa Cendana.
Okay, today we would like to tell you about the beauty of our province. And for the first material will be delivered by my friend Aloysius No. So Aloysius, the screen is yours.
Okay, Rio, thanks for the time given to me. So let me start the first material about local identity of Nusa Tenggara Timur. And I hope all of you can get new insight from Nusa Tenggara Timur. And I have information to use in Indonesia. Sebelum lanjut, teman-teman, aku mau tanya dulu nih di sini. Kira-kira apa yang ada di benaknya teman-teman kalau teman-teman mendengar tentang Nusa Tenggara Timur? Jadi teman-teman boleh answer the question by room chat. Jadi teman-teman kalau dengar Nusa Tenggara Timur, kira-kira yang terpikir di benaknya teman-teman itu apa? Boleh answer the question by room chat. Oke, ada yang bilang komodo. Yang lain lagi boleh teman-teman. Komodo, correct. Oke, hutannya asri. Boleh lanjut lagi? Beach, yes, beautiful beaches. Oke, ada banyak yang teman-teman pikirkan terkait Nusa Tenggara Timur. So, for now, let me know more about Nusa Tenggara Timur. Next slide. Okay, so Nusa Tenggara Timur is the southernmost province of Indonesia. It comprises the eastern portion of the Lesser Sunda Islands, passing the Indian Ocean in the south and the Flores Sea in the north, and a gateway for neighboring countries Timor-Leste and Australia. Nah, teman-teman di sini, teman-teman boleh lihat di sini ada peta Nusa Tenggara Timur, itu yang warna merah. Teman-teman boleh lihat pada petanya. Jadi, Nusa Tenggara Timur merupakan salah satu provinsi paling selatan di Indonesia. So next, Nusa Tenggara Timur has 7 islands and 22 regencies with the main tribes, namely Flores, Sumba, Sabu, Timor, Alor, and Lembata. So this is why the province has another name, Pulau Bambora, which stands for the 7 main islands in this province. Next slide. So, karena Nusa Tenggara Timur terdiri dari berbagai banyak pulau, itu yang membuat Nusa Tenggara Timur itu unik. Membuat Nusa Tenggara Timur menjadi salah satu provinsi yang memiliki keanekaragaman budaya, keanekaragaman kepercayaan, adat istiadat, dan juga pemandangan alam yang luar biasa pastinya. So, that makes me proud as a NTT people. Next slide. So people recognize us from, you can see in this slide, Komodo Dragon, Sasando Instrument, Tenun Ikat, Labuan Bajo, Wairebo Village, and Sei. So let me start number 1 about Komodo Dragon. Next slide. Next slide. So, the Komodo dragon, or Varanus komodoensis, also known as the Komodo monitor, is a member of the monitor lizard family Varandae that is endemic to the Indonesian islands of Komodo, Rinca, Flores. It is the largest extant species of lizard, growing to a maximum length of 3 meters and weighing up to 70 kilograms. The Komodo dragons prefers hot and dry place and typically lives in dry, open grassland, savanna, tropical, forest, and low elevation. As an ecotherm, it most active in the day, although the habit some non-clutter activity. Next slide. So for the second, sasando is instrument. The sasando, also called sasandu, from sandu or sanu, is a tube cedar, a harp-like traditional music string instrument native to Rote Islands of Nusa Tenggara Timur. The name sasando is derived from the Rote dialect word sasando, which means vibrating or a sounded instrument. It is believed that the sasando had already been known to the Rote people since the 7th century. So for the next slide. Okay, number 3, tenun ikat. So tenun ikat is a woven fabric in which process of making motifs is done by tipping the threads. Tenun ikat Nusa Tenggara Timur is a traditional handmade fabric made from cotton fiber with more than 100 patterns inspired by flora or fauna. The patterns are describing mythical figure, plants, animals, and also abstract motifs which show a deep appreciation of the power of nature. Next slide. So for the fourth, Labuan Bajo. Jadi mungkin teman-teman kalau dengar Labuan Bajo, teman-teman pastinya sudah familiar banget ya kalau dengar kata Labuan Bajo. So Labuan Bajo is one of the super priority tourist destination developed by Indonesian Ministry of Tourism. There are many tourist attractions that can be visited, including Pink Beach, Komodo National Park, Padar Islands, dan lain-lain. For the fifth, Wairebo Village, can move the next slide. So, traditional village of Wairebo in a district of Manggarai on the islands of Flores, Nusa Tenggara Timur has received the top award of excellence from UNESCO in 2012. This small and isolated village was recognized for its rebuilding of the traditional Baruniang, traditional house based on the spirit of community cooperation towards a sustainable tradition, while at the same time improving its village welfare. So for the last is CE. So CE, Nusa Tenggara Timur typical smoked meat cooked in a special way served with luat, traditional silipas, and papaya leaves steer fruit vegetable. That's all from me. And for the next material delivered by my friends Rio. So for you, it's time for you.
Okay, thank you, Aloysius. So now I will tell you guys some of the culture of Nusa Tenggara Timur, which I think is unique to share with you all. So next slide. Okay, the first one is Hengedo. Hengedo is a typical greeting tradition of the people of Nusa Tenggara, and they're not shaking hands, but people will bring their noses closer to each other and pressing their noses together when they meet. Hengedo has a very deep meaning, namely intimacy and a sense of attachment to one another. Next slide. Okay, as a sign of brotherhood or sisterhood, aside from being a sign of brotherhood, Henge is also a sign of respect from the young to old. So it cannot be denied that when our eyes meet and look at each other, that is where honesty is depicted between one another. The tradition of Henge, in a broader sense, is an indication of solving problems between the two parties. So by pressing each other's nose as a sign of guilt, then all the problems will be solved. What I know and the facts is if there is a murder case, it can be solved by doing this tradition. So this tradition, we can say that this tradition is so strong for establishing peace. And until now, the tradition of pressing each other's noses continues to be preserved by people of NTT. And when we're meeting fellow NTT people, whenever or wherever we are, Hengedo is a sign of brotherhood that binds one another. Okay, next slide. Okay, the second is Belis Belinwala. So in Larantuka, East Flores, Nusa Tenggara Timur, there are no elephants. But the Belis or dowry for women must use an elephant ivory. The Lama Holland community in Larantuka, they have the tradition of giving ivory to women and is a must for the men's side. This tradition is a tradition that has noble values and is a form of respect for women. Next slide. Okay. However, on the one hand, as a binder of family ties and as a symbol to unite men and women. Belis in the marriage tradition of NTT people explains that the amount of payment for Belis in the form of elephant ivory trunks is strongly influenced by the social status of the prospective bride. And if she's come from a royal family, then her Belis is 7 ivories. But if this woman is from an ordinary family, then her Belis is only 1 ivory. Okay, the price of the ivory will be more expensive. The size is longer and depends on the social background of the woman. If the ivory If the giver that is paid to buy a women's wife is cash, the price is in the range of 200 million rupees or above. Now it may be more expensive because the amount of the giver is also less and less. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is my favorite, guys. So pasola is derived from the word sola or hola, means a kind of a long wooden stick used as a spear to fling each other by two opponent groups of horsemen. After given the prefix spa, it's the meaning to turns to be a game. Next slide. Okay, as you guys can see on the screen, the game is played by throwing wooden spears to the opponent while riding a horse. This annual game is played by two different groups of men from different clans or tribes. The horses used for this ritual are usually ridden by the brave and skilled selected men wearing traditional costumes of Sumba, Nusa Tenggara Timur. Pasola, Pasola is a traditional ceremony of the Sumbanese held in the way of uniquely and thematically traditional norms. Every year in February and March, and has become the focus of attention of the people since it is part of sacred homage to the Marapu, which is the local religion of Sumbanese, indigenous people, as a form of ritual to honor immortal spirit, asking for forgiveness, prosperity, and for an abundant harvest. And this game, it used to end up in a bloody game. So when the wooden spear hit the bare flesh of the participant, when there's no bleeding horseman, then the game is considered not over. It's a little bit creepy, huh? Okay, next slide. Okay, another famous traditional in NTT is the Caci dance. The Caci dance originates from Manggarai, Nusa Tenggara Timur, and this dance contains elements of martial arts or physical fighting. This is a game of dexterity but wrapped in a dance performance. The people of NTT usually perform this during the harvest season as a form of gratitude for abundance of crops. Cha, it means one, and Chi, it means test. So Chachi is a game to test who is the one and who is the most powerful. Next slide.
Ria, I'm sorry, could you please move faster? Your time is.
Oh, okay. The Chachi dance is performed by two dancers who are usually men. And the two dancers wear clothes like soldier clothes and pot. And the clothes are in the form of head covering or mask made of buffalo skin. From the process of whipping each other, of course, there were players who were injured and bleeding, of course. But this doesn't lead to grudge because every player already understands the consequences and only aims to death. So no one hates each other, even though one of the players is bleeding. Okay, the last one. Next slide, please. Okay, I think this is a cool one. So NTT, especially the tribe of Lama, is known as the home of the traditional whale hunting. Villagers hunt large sea animals like whales, manta rays, and sometimes dolphins to provide food and living for the entire village. Whaling is still done on traditional flimsy wooden boats called peledam, managed by between 7 till 14 helmsmen, horsemen, and harpooner, where each is assigned his special duties. Next slide. Okay, when a whale hunt is decided, a number of boats parked on the beach are released from their simple shelter, cheered by the entire villagers, and a troop of boats will set sail together to catch their harvest. Before that, however, everyone gathers to attend a dedicated mass lead by the local Catholic priest to pray for a successful and safe expedition, since the majority of people there are Catholic. When a whale or manta is sighted, they throws their harpoon into the animal, jumping down on the harpoon itself so as to give it its additional weight. And when the target is a huge sperm whale and it is a hit, other team members throw more harpoons on the prey, and when it's finally disabled, together all team members have to heavy body onto the boat. There are taboos for the villagers when it comes to whale hunting. For example, it is forbidden to hunt pregnant whales, young whales, and mating whales. This capacity to recognize these specific taboos can only be learned through extensive period of experience. Unfortunately, some elders worry that the tradition is vanishing as youngster tends to separate tradition from convenient modernity. So that future generation will no longer adhere to such precious traditional value. Okay, next slide. Okay, maybe only some of these unique cultures that I can share with all of you guys, but NTT still has a lot of unique cultures and lots of beautiful tourist spots. And I will be very happy if you all visited my homeland and explored the culture there. Thank you very much, and I return the time to the moderator. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much to Rio and also Luis. What an amazing presentation. It is very interesting about the cultural conditions, also the identity, the local people of Nusa Tenggara Timur. Very unique and increase our knowledge. Thank you, Luis and Rio. Next, our agenda is question and answer session regarding the two topics that have been delivered very well by Group 6 from Universitas Gadjah Mada and also Luis and Rio. For everyone, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop your questions to the chat box or directly ask to the speakers by pressing the raise hand and then turning your microphone on. All right, there is a question from Dita Prasetyaningrum to entities group. Are there any taboo or uncommon things that can be done when we are visiting entity? To Rio and Luis, you can answer this question.
Okay, thank you for the question. Okay, before I answer the question, allow me to answer this question in Bahasa Indonesia. Okay, from Dita, are there any taboo or uncommon things that cannot be done when we are visiting NTT? Okay, allow me to answer this question in Bahasa Indonesia. Sebenarnya begini, semisal contoh saya adalah seorang yang berasal dari suku Timor. Ketika kita datang ke rumah seorang masyarakat yang berasal dari suku Timor, maka alangkah baiknya untuk menunduk ketika memasuki pintu rumah. Walaupun pintu rumahnya itu cukup tinggi, tetapi itu adalah hal yang tabu ketika kita memasuki rumah seorang masyarakat suku Timor, tidak dengan posisi menunduk. Dan juga ada beberapa hal tabu kalau di suku saya, suku Timor, itu contohnya ketika kita diberikan sirih dan pinang. Sirih dan pinang itu apa ya? Ya mungkin teman-teman bisa searching sirih dan pinang. Ketika kita diberikan oleh orang, maka adalah wajib bagi kita untuk mengonsumsi sirih dan pinang tersebut, atau kita akan mendapatkan hal-hal yang berbahaya di masa yang akan datang. Mungkin dari Lois, karena kami berdua berbeda suku, mungkin dari suku Lois ada hal-hal yang tabu, boleh bersama saya menjawab pertanyaan ini. Lois, suaranya.
Lois, I'm sorry, your voice is not clearly. Okay, I think Luis has a problem.
I think we can move into the next question.
All right, we are going to move to the next questions. There is a question from Putri Arum to Group 6. Why is the reason for Group 6 choosing the topic as presentation material? The Group 6, you may answer this question.
Okay, thank you so much for the questions. I would like to answer the questions. So the Borobudur site is well known, but there is an art from the few people are aware of, especially tari topeng ireng or tari topeng dance. Another reality is that when talking about the tari topeng, people will immediately think that the dance typical of West Java. Even though around Borobudur temple, there is also another tari topeng, which is tari topeng ireng. That is why we are interested in discussing and introducing the dance. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much to Sania for answering the questions. Everyone, for those who ask question to group NTT and also to group 6, I think they will answer your questions through the chat box since we don't have much time here. All right. Thank you so much to Rio and Group 6 for answering the questions. We will move on to the third presentation session. The topic of this presentation will be no less interesting and full of knowledge as of the previous presentations. We have Group 7 from Universitas Gajah Mada that consists of Anindya Bian Pahar, Fredila Geralda N, Anissa Sukma Melati, and also Adinda Evita. They have prepared their presentation with the topic of disaster and cultural mitigations. To Abian and friends, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Niken, for the opportunity given to us. And as said by Niken, we are from Group 7 and are going to present to you about Mount Merapi. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the member of our group. From the left, there is Linda, and then myself, Abian, and beside that, there is Della, and for the last one is Nisa. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for this first material will be presented by my friend Linda.
Thank you, Abian. So today I'd like to present about disaster definition. The next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, according to 24 of 2007, disasters are events or series of events that threaten and disrupt people's lives and livelihoods, caused by both natural and or non-natural factors and human factors, resulting in human casualties, environmental damage, property losses, and psychological impacts. The next slide, please. Another definition, according to USDR, is that a disaster is a serious disruption to the functioning of a society causing widespread losses to human life in material, economic, or environmental terms, and exceeding the ability of the community concerned to cope using their own resources. The next slide, please. So, there are several clarifications about natural disaster. First, geological. It includes earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruption. Secondly, hydrogeometrical. It includes floods, droughts, and typhoons. Third, biology. It lacks epidemics. The next slide, please. Four, technology. It's like transportation and industrial accident. 5, environment. It's like fire and deforestation. Last but not least is social. It's like conflict and terrorism. So the material we will cover today is about the natural disaster of a volcanic eruption, which is classified as a geological disaster. So the next part will be presented by my friends Abian. Abian, it's time yours.
Thank you, Linda. So next slide, please. Merapi, also known as Mount Merapi, is a famous stratovolcano located in central part of Java Island, Indonesia. This active volcanic mountain has erupted many times over the past decades, and during these periods of volcanic activity, the local communities have faced danger and destruction. Next slide, please. Thank you. Due to its frequent eruption, the height of Mount Merapi, also known as Garuda's Peak, varies with volcanic activity, which affect the shape of its peak. Until now, Mount Merapi has a peak height of 2,930 meters above sea level since the 2010 eruption. And for the next material will be presented by my friend Nisa.
Okay, thank you so much, Abian. And I'm going to continue the presentation, and I would like to tell about the 2010 incident. Next slide, please. Okay, so it happened in 2010. There was a very powerful eruption of Mount Merapi. Seismic activity began in late September 2010, leading to the volcanic eruption on October 26, 2010. At least 353 people were killed as a result of the incident. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the negative impact from the incident, including community settlements, property, and a variety of other important things. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the positive impact from the incident. So at Mount Merapi Museum, we can see all the scars of Mount Merapi incident in 2010. Concerning the positive consequences of the incident, which is include making the land fertile, providing mineral resources, providing renewable energy sources, promoting recreation and tourism, and the last one is producing volcanic rocks. Next slide, please. All right, so the mitigation before eruption. When we face with natural disasters, we have several options for mitigating them. Begin by issuing an alert to the surrounding community to migrate to the safer areas, avoid open areas, protect yourself from volcanic ash, do not wear contact lenses, use a mask or wet cloth to cover your mouth and nose, and wear the clothes that protect the body, such as long sleeve, long pants, and hats. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the mitigation after the eruption. That must be done is to avoid driving a car in the area affected by volcanic ash rain because it can damage the vehicle engine, brakes, gears, and ignition. And finally, if the condition permit, we can do community service to clean the roof from the pile of volcanic gas because its weight can knock down and damage the roof of the building that is still structurally. Okay, so I think that's all from me. And the next slide will be explained by Fredela. The time is yours, please.
Thank you, Nisa. So the next material is about a cultural belief. According to popular belief, Mount Merapi is related to Tugu Jogja, Kraton, Krapyak Stage, and the third coast in a straight line. The village is the meeting point between the inhabitants of Mount Merapi and the inhabitants of the south coast. In addition, until now, there has been a traditional ceremony that is still carried out by the community around Mount Merapi, namely the Labuhan Merapi ceremony. Next slide, please. Next slide again. The Labuhan Merapi ceremony is one of the traditional ceremonies that has existed since the 17th century during the Islamic Mataram Kingdom. This ceremony is intended to ensure that the country and its people are always safe, peaceful, and prosperous. Although the palace organizes this traditional ceremony, the community is also involved in its execution. The traditional ceremony at Mount Merapi is an expression of gratitude to God for the blessing that have been received. Mount Merapi has always been a source for fertility for the surrounding agricultural land. People usually bring palawija, pala kependem, pala kesimpar, and pala gumantung to complete the ceremony. These are all symbols of crops and human labor that become physical and spiritual sustenance. Next slide will explain by Abian. So Abian, time is yours.
Thank you, Della. And in conclusion, the well-known stratovolcano Merapi is situated in the center of Indonesia's Java Island. Mount Merapi experienced a very strong eruption in 2010, which caused fatalities among people as well as environmental harm. The volcanic ash rain that followed the incident caused at least 353 deaths. And we can all see the traces of Mount Merapi incident at the Mount Merapi Museum. And according to popular belief, Mount Merapi is related to Tugu Jogja, Kraton, Krapyak Stage, and the South Coast in a straight line. In addition, until now, there has been a traditional ceremony that is still carried out by the community around Mount Merapi. This ceremony is intended to ensure that the country and its people are always safe, peaceful, and prosperous. Next slide, please. And this is our references. Next slide, please. And special thanks to Mbak Okta from the Mount Merapi Museum for helping us and making this possible. Next slide, please. I guess that is it. All from us. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be giving back to Niken. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Abian and friends, for delivering such a very well explained and comprehensive material about disaster and cultural mitigation. From this explanation, it can be seen that natural disaster can be associated with people's belief. Very interesting and unique. Well, appreciate to Abian and his friend for delivering the material very well. Now let's move on to the last presentation that will be delivered by Group 8, Universitas Gadjah Mada, which consists of Maulana Ardano Fasli, Kindis Humaira, and Abelia Marstelda, with their interesting topic, traditional arts or cultural community and the profession. Okay, to Ardan and friends, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you for the time given to us. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Now, we're from Group 8 of Universitas Gadjah Mada, and we're going to talk about traditional arts, cultural community, and the profession. Next slide, please. Okay, first, I'm going to introduce the members of the group. I'm Gundis Humaira, and here I am with two of my friends, Abelia Marstelda and Maulana Ardano Fasli. Next slide, please. So here's the topic outline of today's material. First, we're going to talk about the introduction or the definition, and then the example of cultural community and the profession. After that, we talk about painters and painters community, and then about one of Indonesian painters, which is Mr. Sidik Martowijoyo, and lastly, the conclusion. Next slide, please. Okay, so the introduction. Traditional arts is part of a culture of a certain group of people that share a common ethnic heritage, language, occupation, and so on. And cultural community itself is the result of the free choice of people sharing a specific culture to form a group. Next slide, please. So, what is the traditional arts or cultural community and the profession? It is a specific profession of a specific cultural community that shares a certain traditional arts. So, it is a group of people that have the same thought, the same way of thinking, and they have a similar job to live with. Next slide, please. Okay, next we have the examples of cultural community and the profession. It can be a group of painters, singers, about business, about education, and as simple as a group of people wandering in the same place or town. For example, in Indonesia, we have Ambangan community, Kampung Cembo community, Indonesian Painters community, Indonesian Watercolor Society, and so on. So yeah, I think that is from me. Next slide will be presented by my friend Abel. So Abel, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Gundis. Next, we are going to talk about a painter. So, what is a painter? A painter is a person who paints buildings, walls, ceilings, and woodwork, especially as a job. There are several famous painters in Indonesia, such as Avandi Kusuma, Agus Jaya, Jayahan Sukmantoro, Basuki Abdullah, Raden Saleh, Sidik Martowijoyo, and so on. They also got the best painting of their own. For example, the last poem of Mencuri Raden Saleh, This one talks about painting of the arrest of Prince Diponegoro by Raden Saleh. Next slide, please. There are several painters community in Indonesia, namely KOMPI, that stands for Komunitas Pelukis Indonesia or Indonesian Painters Community. And then there are IWS that stands for Indonesian Watercolor Society, KOPI that stands for Komunitas Pecinta Lukisan or Community of Painting Lovers, Dusun Art, Kelompok Nuansa, and so on. Next slide, please. Our group managed to have an interview with one of the legend and a professional painter, Mr. Sidik Martowijoyo. We met him at his gallery just last week ago. Next slide, please. So, who is Mr. Sidik? Mr. Sidik Martowijoyo is an Indonesian painter who was born in Malang on 24 September 1937. He's also known as Pit Mabuk. Pit is a Chinese brush and Mabuk means strong. So it's a nickname which means he paints abstractly with a drum brush that makes his painting special. His art style is a combination of Eastern and Western art, and his biggest achievement is participating in his famous exhibition, the Louvre International Art Exhibition in Paris back then in 2014. Next slide, please. Okay, now we have the brief history of Mr. Sidik. Mr. Sidik Martowijoyo has been committed to the art field for decades. Initially, his painting was heavily influenced by Chinese art style, but by the time the event of G30S communism movement occurred in 1965, he paused his painting activity for years. In the early New Order era under the leadership of President Suharto, everything that is Chinese or has Chinese influence in it was completely banned in Indonesia. It was in the 90s when President Suharto began to open relationship with Chinese executives. The restriction seems to be loosened. Mr. Sidik began to continue painting for a few years until the riot event of 1968 broke out. Around the year of 2006, he finally resumed painting again for the second time. Slowly but surely, he began to develop his own genre called abstraction, in which his painting style isn't completely abstract or realistic either, rather in between. Okay, that's all for me. The next stuff will be explained by my friend Abdan.
All right, thank you, Abel. So, how about painters in Indonesia from Mr. Sidik's perspective? Well, according to him, painters in Indonesia have been making a progressive movement ever since the Reformation era, and even more nowadays. It is mainly because the freedom of press, speech, and art creation is no longer restricted. Not to mention the existence of social media makes it easier for publishing. Mr. Sidik has a great hope that young artists could make a positive impact on Indonesia by pursuing their passion to make a meaningful creation that delivers a message rather than craving for money and popularity. He also stated that exhibition events held by painter communities such as Art Jok went very well, and he hoped that it would always grow because this could influence other local newcomer artists to emerge altogether moving forward in that community. Could you move to the next slide, please? The next is about Mr. Sidik's gallery. It is placed right beside his house. He put some of his best paintings there. Mr. Sidik said that each painting has a distinctive feel to it. Therefore, this gallery has a completely different vibe compared to his museum in Balai Raos. The difference between his gallery and his museum is that his gallery feels more homey since it was located right beside his house. It is such a small but meaningful place for him. The next slide, please. And then we have the gallery highlights. Okay, the next slide. Here are some pictures that we took while we are visiting Mr. Sidik's gallery. These paintings are all created by him at his place. There aren't too many, probably around 20 pieces or something. And also he mentioned that most of his paintings took usually took 2 or 3 days to complete, and his biggest one took up to a week to finish. The next slide, please. Lastly, Mr. Siddiq got beautiful words for us. He said that as a young generation, we have to pay attention more to this world and nature. This can be done in several ways, such as painting. Painting is not always about drawing on a canvas and selling it to make money, or holding painting exhibitions to gain popularity. Rather, it's about how we express ourselves and make a movement through the meaning of our paintings. Okay, the next slide. The next slide, please. All right, now we have come to an end of our presentation. Thank you so much for your attention, and we are waiting for your next question. I'll give it back to you, Kak Niken.
All right, thank you so much, Ardan and friends, for delivering the material very well. I personally think that Mr. Sigit is very inspiring person and very talented, and also his painting are very beautiful. Thank you so much to Group 7 and Group 8 of Universitas Gadjah Mada for providing such an insightful and comprehensive information. Now, we are moving to the question and answer session. If you have any questions about the two previous topics from Group 7 and Group 8 of Universitas Gadjah Mada, don't be hesitant to deliver your questions via chat box, or you can ask directly to the speakers by using the microphone. All right, there is a question. I'm sorry, wait a minute. I will read it for you. There is from Hanifam Reski Ramadhani. What kind of vibe Mr. Sidik Martowijoyo usually gave from his painting to Group 8? You may answer this question.
All right, may I answer the questions from Hanif?
Yes.
What is it? What kind of vibe Mr. Sidik Martowijoyo usually gave from his paintings? According to our interview with him, in his senior age, Mr. Sidik is getting more into nature and harmony. So his recent paintings often give that peaceful ambiance. For example, his paintings give impressions of nature like a calmly flowing water, views of mountains or wavy beaches, altogether depicted in his abstraction style. And I think that's all I can tell. Thank you.
Thank you, Arden. There is also a question from Adisti Gabira to Group 7. She asks about what does volcano activity in the past, in your opinion, would Mount Merapi have another eruption anytime soon? I'm sorry. To Group 7, you may answer this question. To Group 7, who wants to answer the question?
Okay, I will answer from Adisti question. According to Dia Ikarina Mati, Diana Puspita, Sari, Nanik Ucami Handayani, and Brahma Saragasiwi, the research on the likelihood of the Mount Merapi eruption using a Bayesian event. The result of data processing show that Merapi will erupt again in the future with probably of 0.822. The eruption will take place in the main character of Merapi with probability. Thank you.
All right, thank you. In the chat box, there are a lot of questions to Group 8 and Group 7. For Group 8 and Group 7, you may answer the question through the chat box. Since we don't have much time today, thank you so much to the participants who asked the questions. The questions are really good. That indicates that the audience here are very enthusiastic about this webinar. We get additional knowledge beyond the material that has been delivered by groups that have been performed. And then I would like to remind to all attendees not to forget to fill in the attendance link and also the feedback form that was sent to the chat box. Both must be filled out because later they will be used as requirement to get the e-certificate. All right, I think we don't have enough time here. Now, before I end this session, please can you give a big applause to the speaker by clapping your hand for appreciation or give a reaction so we can all see how excited you are. All right, thank you everyone. The presentation session in webinar event talks 42 under the theme of the diversity of culture and art in various aspects of human life, social and historical heritage have finished. I would like to express my appreciation to all the speakers for sharing the fascinating material and also to all the participants for your participation. Now I give the rest of the session back to our MC. Tawanda, time is on your side.
All right, thank you for all presenters and also thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar event talks hashtag 42 with the theme the diversity of cultural and arts in various aspects of human life, social and historical heritage. So before we close the event, please don't forget to fill the attendance and feedback form that the link has already been shared on the chat box because we will send the e-certificate based on the attendance and feedback form. We will appreciate it if you would provide your feedback generally and wholeheartedly. And on behalf of the committee of webinar Event Talks 42 and our presenters, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day. Media team, the screen is yours.
From the truth, don't know what's come over me. It seems like yesterday when I said we'll be friends forever.